My name is Jon Draper. I am the Vice President of Research and Training at the Stem Cell Network. And today we are hosting a webinar on this current round of funding opportunities that we're offering. Joining me today is Michael Rudnicki, the Scientific Director of the Stem Cell Network. And we will be discussing going into all of the details about the competition that we're offering this round. Just as a note, the webinar is recorded and we will post it on YouTube as soon as we're able. You'll be able to actually access, if you haven't already looked, on our website, we have the new opportunities are listed, and I believe they've been dropped in the chat. Yep, there we go. Ellie's dropped in the chat. Thank you, Ellie. And today, the purpose is to just give you a presentation about all of the programs that we'll be offering in this competition. Also provide the community with an opportunity to ask questions, and Michael and I will do our best to answer them. A French translation of these slides will be available shortly, as soon as we're able to get them translated. And then I think at this point, I'm just going to hand over to you, Michael, and you can make the start.
Well, first of all, welcome everybody, and I'm very encouraged that we have so many participants today, and looking forward to this discussion. So next slide, please. So about the Stem Cell Network. So the Stem Cell Network began life almost 21 years ago now, as a National Centers of Excellence through that specific program. When we ran through our first 14 years as an NCE, we transitioned out of the program and are now a standalone agency that's a national not-for-profit. And the Stem Cell Network supports three main objectives: stem cell and regenerative medicine research, of course, also training of the next generation of HQP. It's a very big part of our mandate, and directly supporting knowledge mobilization and transfer of stem cell and regenerative medicine research. That's what we do. We're not CIHR, and I will make that point several times. So this captures the three things that we do to power excellence and to drive impact: research, training, and knowledge mobilization. And if you go to our website, you can download our new 3-year strategic plan called Ignite, which kicks off this exciting new chapter of the Stem Cell Network. Next slide. So our vision is to power life-saving therapies and technologies through regenerative medicine research for the benefit of all. Our mandate is to be a national research leader dedicated to accelerating regenerative medicine and its translation for the benefit of Canada and Canadians. And our organizational values really represent who we are and how we go about our business. Excellence and innovation first, continual learning and improvement, integrity in our research and commitment to ethical practice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and an environment that fosters collaboration. And this is throughout the organization and throughout the research that we sponsor. Next slide. So by the numbers, so to speak, in the first 21 years of our activities, we provided direct funding of 139 million of direct investment in research, training, and outreach. We've garnered through partnerships, research partnerships, 148 million participation in projects and activities. We've funded over 225 translational research projects. 231 research groups have been supported. Over 5,000 trainees and HQP have been trained. We've sponsored 27 clinical trials, and we've catalyzed the formation of 23 regenerative medicine biotech companies. So that's, quite an impressive footprint and impact over the last 21 years. And we see this growing and expanding as we move into the future. Next slide. So we've already completed our first round of research funding last year, or earlier this year, I'm sorry. We funded 32 research projects worth 19.5 million. And I should mention that our funding comes directly from the federal government. These projects garnered and leveraged an additional 22.4 million in partner support, much of that in cash, but also in kind. We've engaged 224 investigators and collaborators. 180 trainees are involved with these projects. Funding is flowing to 17 Canadian research institutions, universities, hospital institutes, and so on. And the work is in 20 different research areas. And you can hit the link on our website and see the full list of projects. So this represents the largest round of investment in our history. Importantly, and something that I think the network is proud of, is that 59% of the projects are led by women, and 12 of these projects are led by early career investigators. Next slide. So what is regenerative medicine? So it's not an open mandate like the funding councils, in particular the Canadian Institute of Health Research. Our focus is on regenerative medicine. And this is the branch of medicine that develops methods to regrow, repair, replace damaged or diseased cells, organs, or tissues. And regenerative medicine also includes the generation of therapeutic use of stem cells, tissue engineering, and the production of artificial organs. That's not our definition, that's from nature. In your letter of intent that you'll be preparing, you really need to justify your project through the lens of regenerative medicine research. It can't be just anything. It has to be relevant to our mandate. For example, historically, we have funded projects on cancer stem cells, but we've shifted now so that we fund not just open-ended sorts of cancer type projects. They must be regenerative in nature and or use stem cells for addressing the proposed problem. So eligibility is a big issue, and on the next slide, we'll have more of that. And so the letter of intent really is specifically to for us to screen for eligibility and also to move us forward in putting together the peer review groups. So this describes in a little more detail what we're looking for. And this may not be all inclusive, but and if you have questions, you certainly can reach out to us, Jon Draper in particular, and do some queries. But for example, developing, testing therapeutic approaches that are regenerative in nature. This includes cell and or gene therapies, addressing the role and function of stem cells in a tissue or disease, using stem cells as a necessary component for the generation of functional stem cell types, investigating a small molecule or biologic that acts on or is dependent on endogenous stem cells for a particular therapeutic effect, and also addressing ethical, legal, and social implications, opportunities, or challenges associated with regenerative medicine research or translation. So in your LOI, you will be making the case that your project is indeed relevant to the mandate of the network. And I should say also that we're not CIHR, we don't support discovery research. Our mandate is really to fund research with a translational arrow, and particular programs are focused on different parts of that translational arrow, as you'll hear in more detail. But in terms of being competitive, the more you can emphasize that translational arrow and frame your grant using a translational arrow, I think the more helpful it will be to you as an applicant. Every single application will be considered a new application, so you're not able to rebut the previous reviews. In fact, the reviews may be entirely different. You certainly can use that to revise your application and improve it, hopefully, or you may choose to ignore it, but it'll be treated as a new application. And reviewers will not have access to prior review feedback or for any previous application. There's also no renewal applications either. All right, next slide, and I think over to you, Jon.
Hi, thank you, Michael. There's a question actually that's just come up, which is germane to this slide. And so we have a question about biomaterials, bioengineering, and manufacturing are missing. They would fall under the developing and testing of therapeutics for regenerative medicine. So it's there, don't worry about it. We are big into bioengineering. We know it's a major hub of our community, and it just falls under that generic description. Okay, so round 2 programs. This round, we have 5 programs that we are offering. Of note, all of the programs are 22 months in duration. They will start April 1st of 2023 and end January 31st of 2025. This is primarily due to the restriction that we have in terms of the cycle of funding that we have. We have to wrap up all of our activities for this current federally supported cycle of activities by the end of the financial year in 2025. So it means that everything has to be wrapped up and reported to the government. But we are, as I said, there's five programs that are available: the Impact Awards, the Impact Awards ELSI Stream, the Accelerating Clinical Translation Awards, Clinical Trial Awards, and the Fueling Biotech Partnership Awards. A little bit about the competition timeline. So the competition will launch on September 1st with an LOI. There's a 3-week period for the LOI. It will close on September 22nd. There'll be then a short period just for SCN to be able to do evaluations of eligibility, to look at, make sure that the LOIs are complete, etc. And then full applications will be open to eligible LOI submissions on September 27th or thereabouts. And they will then run, the full application process will run until December 1st when the deadline is. And we have a deadline of 5 p.m. Eastern time. And this is to assist those who need submission assistance by their signing authorities within that time period, to make sure they can do it on the end of day and it's not too late for those signing authorities to be able to help them with the submission. A word about the following stages once the full deadline, the full application deadline is complete. Obviously, peer review will then be performed, and this is a 2-stage peer review that we perform. The first peer review is an international peer review. We have fantastic panels of peer reviewers that we've been able to recruit, and you can actually look at the annual report or actually onto the website here, the research funding overview page, which will list also the peer reviewers. We recruit new peer reviewers each round, and this international peer review assesses the scientific and commercial excellence of the applications. A separate then strategic peer review is performed, and this alludes to Michael's point about we have a specific strategic mandate from the government of Canada to support regenerative medicine. And so we have to then look at the applications using our research management committee within that lens. Then finally, the research management committee makes a series of recommendations, which then are ultimately approved by the board. As I say, follow this link if you want to see a little bit more about the detail of our funding peer review process. We should actually, I should mention as well, our target timeline is to notify applicants within March before the start of the awards. So the awards are due to start April 1st of 2023, and we hope to notify in March. Just a word about submission. This is the second competition that we're running that will be using the Proposal Central Hub. You should have signed up for this already, hopefully. It's now commonly used by many funding organizations. There's a bunch of reference documents available that you can access through both Proposal Central when you're looking at the different programs and you've started an application, and also through the SCN website. And those include the LOI instructions, which are, I think also they should be available right now on the website. The program-specific guidelines I know are available right now on the website. And the program-specific application instructions, and actually an FAQ document will be available starting September 1st when we open up the competition fully. As I mentioned, lead and co-applicants must register as users on Proposal Central. So do that now if you haven't already. You must also have a designated institutional signing authority or financial officer listed on the application. They need to be able to sign off, and so they need to have you will need to grant them access during the application process, and this is explained within the application instructions. And just a couple of points that are important here. So only investigators who are going to be receiving funds from Stem Cell Network should be listed as a lead or co-investigator. Everyone else is a collaborator. And this is really for our financial purposes. I know some collaborators make significant contributions towards projects, but for our purpose, we need to have this only those who are lead or co-investigators and receiving SCN funded listed as such. And importantly, the institutional affiliation for each investigator must match the institution that will be receiving the project funds. And I know many members of our community have cross appointments at different institutions. And so, for instance, if you were cross appointed at University of Toronto, for instance, but you were doing your research at Sunnybrook, for instance, you would actually then, if the research is being done at Sunnybrook, you would list Sunnybrook as your institution. I can help as much as possible, and I encourage the community, if you've got questions, to contact me. But they should be questions really about the funding program, eligibility, etc. Technical questions about Proposal Central, I'm going to have to redirect you to the Proposal Central help desk, because I can't deal with many of those issues. I don't have that kind of privilege within the system to do that. So if you do have questions, then do that. Okay. And then some notes on the common criteria. These are criteria that apply to all of the different programs that we're offering in this round. And so the first one, obviously, we've discussed this as regenerative medicine focused competition. We are a regenerative medicine focused organization. And specifically, we don't fund basic science. We fund science that is moving discoveries along the translational pathway as well. Projects must have aims, milestones, and deliverables, and milestones are time points that delineate a key phase in a project's schedule, and deliverables are the outputs for that. So that must be included. So we request, and this is many of these are actually evaluated during the strategic review by the RMC. So projects must have a number of different considerations completed, and those include a description of the best practices and measures that will be adopted to ensure robust, unbiased, and reproducible results. Think rigor and reproducibility there. And so there's a whole range of different areas that will cover. So, ensuring that you've described how your experimental design and methods improve rigor, how laboratory management, project management, data governance, or good documentation practices are being incorporated and used. And we also require risk mitigation strategies to be listed as well. And that's, I think it's fairly straightforward, but they can go beyond just, maybe an experiment won't work. It's more about also considering if you're writing an application that's related to commercialization, what are competing technologies that might be an issue for the eventual commercialization? What about partner engagement? If the partner is disengaged, how does that affect your project, etc.? And specifically this round, we have introduced a section which is specifically addresses EDI, EDI, equity, diversity and inclusion, sometimes called DEI as well. And we are going to produce some documents which will relate to providing some guidance on EDI and knowledge mobilization plans. But generally, EDI will include steps to reduce bias during recruitment, EDI training, awareness, resources, and policies that you'll be able to implement within the team to ensure that EDI is observed and as equal as possible access is maintained throughout the team and the duration of the project. Oh, sorry. Knowledge mobilization. There's a lot of this is covered in the application instructions, so I won't go into great deals, but it should go beyond just basic publications and just consider stakeholders. Are they engaged? Will they actually take up your outputs? Those sorts of considerations. And a training plan for the HQP. It has to be fairly substantive, actually describe how there's going to be skills development opportunities, and these will lead to improved career outcomes. Oh, and then federal partnerships. These non-federal partnerships, sorry, these are really important, and partnering is a requirement for all of the programs that we offer. And there's lots of opportunities to partner here. It doesn't just have to be a company or charity. There are opportunities beyond that, and certainly there's partner matching in terms of, for instance, institutional salaries, investigator salaries, and indirect costs. That's an accessible form of matching that we require, and everyone can do that. So I should say, though, that partner matching is a criterion that is evaluated during the review process, and applications with higher partner matching typically may rank more highly than during this review process. So it's really important that you do have that in place, along with letters of support from the partners as well. Just the final 2 points. So you can be a lead investigator on only one LOI submission and project application per program. It doesn't mean that you can't put in multiple applications as a lead investigator across programs. So you could go put one in, for instance, in the Impact Awards, and one in, for instance, in the Accelerating Clinical Translation Awards as well. So, but you can only do one per program. And then there's eligibility requirements. You must be a tri-agency eligible to receive this, and there's more information in the guidelines, links to that there as well. This round, we are requiring training as well. Research security is an important topic for the federal government, and they have made it clear that we need to ensure our investigators are aware of research security and some of the issues surrounding that. So we have two options here. One, for those who attended our in-person research day on July 20th in 2022, you can either have attended that in person, or you can be familiar with the Safeguarding Your Research portal and the 3 courses that are listed there. You have to obtain certificates, and they will be required to be uploaded as well. There's links again within both the application instructions, the guidelines, I believe, as well, for that as well. And second, we'll require certificates for completion of the CIHR Sex and Gender in Research training, and those certificates will be required as well. So I'll hand back over to you, Michael, and you can introduce the Impact Awards.
All right, so this is the first of the 5 programs. These are worth $250,000 over 22 months. And these has often been referred to as a catalyst or an idea grant, but we're looking for something a little more substantive than that. Typically, these are proof of principle experiments for gene or cell therapy development of new models, expression and epigenetic studies to understand the behavior of stem cells or progenitor cells in a relevant disease setting. The applicant should be able to articulate the translational arrow, placing the research on in somewhere along the bench to bedside path. These could also seed research avenues that build intellectual priority that can yield a translational or commercial activities. Typically, these are towards a work in a single lab, but it's also important that these include collaborators from outside the lead investigator's investigation to build the network. Over the years, we've found that the networking aspect of these projects really helps build capacity in Canada and strengthen the regenerative medicine research enterprise nationally. Of course, like any application, supporting preliminary data is important to show feasibility and to show that you have experience with the critical methods. So that greatly strengthens the application. And again, don't forget about providing matching funds. The more you can deliver, the more competitive the application can be. So this also includes things like a portion of your salary from your institution, any grants that are relevant that are non-federal government are also eligible if you have provincial funding, health charity funding, a research contract with a company. All of that can be relevant to include in part. You just need to have a letter. So that is the Impact Award program for wet lab research. The next slide. We have an analogous program for LC research, ethical, legal, social implications. And this supports the knowledge translation of regenerative medicine research. These projects can focus on social, economic, technological, regulatory, patient, other ethical questions or challenges that can be addressed to support the knowledge and advancement of regenerative medicine in Canada and globally. The projects can focus on outputs that go beyond traditional academic research projects, including digital education and cultural materials. Project plans should include details on how the research will be tailored for and used by receptors, for example, policy and regulatory users, patient groups, academic stakeholders, media, or the general public, etc. And should include letters from these receptors that demonstrate their interest in the outputs. And again, awards typically go to support work in an individual group or lab. The creation and maintenance of databases should not represent a major component of the activities funded by this award. So the grant can't be only to support a maintenance of a creation and maintenance of a database, for example. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Michael. Moving on, so the Accelerating Clinical Translation Awards. These are kind of analogous to the prior disease team awards. So these are looking at supporting multidisciplinary research projects. So this means that these are teams of individuals who are focused on the moving stem cell related or regenerative medicine related top technologies towards clinical trials within the next 5 years. As alluded to before, basic research is not eligible here. There's a whole range of different topics that can be covered, but these can include LC. Projects can focus on preclinical work, toxicities testing, etc. And there's also the opportunity to actually use some of the project budget to support activities that are related to moving a trial towards the clinic. So this could be engagement with the regulators, clinical study design, data development, all those sorts of different areas that are related to moving forward. And so these are really situated towards groups to move a technology towards the clinic as soon as possible. Next up are the Clinical Trials Awards. So we're offering Clinical Trial Awards again this year. They are slightly smaller than last time, but they reflect the time length of these ones. So these support early phase clinical trials. These are phase 1, phase 2 trials, and they're focusing on therapies or technologies relevant to regenerative medicine. And the aim here is to make sure that these technologies are actually getting to the Canadian patients that really matter for all of the research that we do. Of note, SCN will contribute a maximum of 40% to the cost of a trial. So this means that if you want to ask for the full amount, you're going to have to find if you want 750,000, you're going to have to find 2.5 times that from other sources as well. Of note, the REB and CTA approval, so this is the Health Canada no objection letter, they must be in place prior to funding. And so I believe the deadline in the guidelines is, I think, February 24th, but that may shift slightly because that's just to align with whenever the RMC meets. So we have, you've got up until the point where the RMC essentially meets to evaluate to get those CTAs and REBs or approvals available. New this round as well, all trials must be that we fund must be registered at clinicaltrials.gov, and this can happen after the award notification, but definitely has to occur before patient recruitment starts. With regards to manufacturing, we've got to know that if it is a trial that's related to a cell product, then we've got to know that the cell product is available and actually able to be delivered to patients. So we need a letter of support from whoever is doing your cell manufacturing to say that the product will be available within the time frame stated to be able to deliver to patients, and won't be a stumbling block for completing the trial. And the other elements you can read there yourself, but typically, we request that an academic or clinical institution to serve as the sponsor for an SCN-funded clinical trial. But if it is sponsored by a company, then we need a risk mitigation letter from the company that will be required at the point of submitting the full application. And that company should be an SME. Michael, back over to you.
Okay, so this is our final program, Fueling Biotechnology Partnerships. So the aim here is to really help the runway for early stage Canadian biotech companies in the regenerative medicine stage by providing some non-dilutive funding. Now, we can't fund companies directly. We have to fund academic research. And the thinking here is that often the research is being supported in founders' labs or in other labs with company money to get the patent application out or move the work forward in different ways, and we can provide funding to that researcher to help bootstrap the company and lengthen their runway so they can have a better chance of getting to their milestones. So it supports these partnerships between regenerative medicine researchers, academics, and these early stage startup companies, and really to build capacity in the regenerative medicine space. We want to support work and projects that are novel, competitively differentiated, and that are addressing a key translational question or bottleneck that will enable the technology or therapy to move into the clinic or market within 5 years. And these applications must be coming from the applicant at a eligible Canadian institution, and the company must be a Canadian SME in the field. In other words, it can't be an international pharma and so on. And where the project should be focused on advancing a Canadian regenerative medicine innovation. We require a development plan and a commercialization assessment that articulates the path, the competitiveness, and the value-creating deliverables. And project funds can be used to offset IP filings or licensing agreements, etc. But again, competitiveness of the application also depends on the amount of money the partner is putting in. So if you have no matches or no commercial entity investing in the project, that's not a very competitive project. This really is to partner with an existing company rather than create a company down the road in the future. That would be an impact grant that you should be applying for, not this one. Okay.
Okay. So we're open for Q&As, and I'll maybe there's a few things to note. For instance, the impact awards, they can be for an individual, but I think if there's additional expertise on a team, it's always beneficial, and it shows networking, teamwork, etc., and multidisciplinary activity. That's always, I think, valued through the review process as well. I've got a few questions coming in. Will the slides be circulated in addition to the recording? Yes, I will state that the slides themselves capture just many of the points that are actually in the guidelines. So you're not going to get a great deal of additional information there, but have a look, and we'll definitely circulate those as well and make them available. We also have a question here, Michael. Could we, a Canadian researcher, have an investigator from Europe, a co-investigator from Europe?
Yeah, so it can't be a co-investigator because we cannot flow money outside of Canada to a non-Canadian institution. However, they can be a collaborator, and if they invoice the PI for work done, and that could be done in different ways, the funding could flow in part to that institution. We just can't write a check to a foreign institution.
But it has to be quite clear that that has to be an eligible service. And I think if you need clarification on that, you can contact me or Shannon Seth-Durham at the Stem Cell Network to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, but they can only be a collaborator, not a co-investigator.
Okay. Are the training certificates required at the LOI stage, or just at the full application stage? I can answer that. Really, the LOI stage is very minimal, and so there's no requirement for those sorts of documents at that stage. It is at the full application stage that all of the documents, the complete application package, will be required. So this is, I think, a duplicative one. This is encouraged to have collaborators that are Canadian or rather international. Maybe not duplicative, actually. So, Michael, which is better, Canadian or international collaborators?
I wouldn't say one or the other is better. Certainly, international collaborators are to be encouraged. In fact, we have some specific programs that will help facilitate that. For example, I think we have a partnership with the UK. Have we announced that yet? Or am I incorrect on that?
We have currently we have an exchange program with the UK.
Yeah.
So the exchange program, which I think is still open, the competition for that until mid-September, allows trainee exchange and actually ECR as well to between labs as well to exchange experience.
Yes. But as I said earlier, we cannot flow money directly to international partners. But if it's if it's relevant to the application, then international collaborators fine. Canadian collaborators are also fine and are encouraged.
How innovative can an impact grant be? We will use methods we have developed, but really looking to put in place a new technology.
Totally. I think that's utterly acceptable, Corinne. And I think that's what we're looking for, innovative applications. Now, in terms of technology development, of course, you're not going to have preliminary data showing that it works, but you should have preliminary, it's helpful to show that it's feasible.
Yes, for sure. Preliminary data is always helpful because it supports the application during peer review.
I think, John, you skipped a question on funding rates.
Yeah, I was about to go back to that one. Yeah. Do you want to answer that one?
I don't know the percentages off the top of my head, but I know they're high.
Yes, it depends by program. So the funding percentage, the success rate percentage, it really depends on program, and it can reach up to 30%, but it's typically between 20 and 30%. I wonder what else. So there's what have we got here? We've got how many grants will we funded in each category, but I think we cover that as a percentage there. Any other questions coming in? Maybe there's some sort of stock questions I can answer here as well, which would be, I think we've covered who may apply for SCN funding through this competition. So you have to be an eligible investigator. That's important. It's also, if you haven't, for instance, if you're a postdoctoral fellow and you're about to take up a position, it's important that you have or hold a firm offer at the time that you're applying for the applicant. You're actually applying for the award. And so this must be an offer from an eligible Canadian university, and you must hold that position though at the point of the taking up the award. So if, for instance, your appointment starts later in April, that would make you ineligible, because you'd have to be available April 1st to be able to take up the award. I don't know if it's necessarily relevant for these awards because they're relatively short, 22 months, but it is anticipated that if you're on a short-term contract, that your contract extends at least 6 months beyond the end date of the award. Michael, here's a question for you. Do you have to be a former award recipient to apply for SCN funding?
If I understand that question correctly, it's an open competition. Anybody can apply.
Yes, that's exactly. Yeah. We've got more questions.
The stem cell network has been like that way for 20 years. Anyone
Yes.
can apply.
Yeah.
They're quite different from other NCEs. We also have 2 new questions in the Q&A.
Right. Okay. So here we go. Is fundamental research with potential not immediate for regenerative medicine encouraged?
So yeah, I can answer that. We are not CIHR. So a completely basic question is something we will not support. We want to see a translational arrow in a disease context, pointing to some future therapy. And depending on the program, it'll be at different, the arrow will be in different places. Obviously, a clinical trial will be testing an idea in the clinic. The ECR awards probably are the most basic of the applicants, the types of applications that we fund. But again, the question is framed with in a translational context to impact a disease or a regenerative issue, rather than what a completely how do stem cells work basic kind of question. In terms of support for early career investigators, we have a specific program for that. That was very successful. That was, though, in the previous competition, not in this application competition.
So there's a rephrasing of a question. What would you say is the difference in philosophy between the impact grant and a regular CIHR project grant?
So a CIHR project grant is for 5 years. It's can be quite basic, discovery type research. Typically, a project grant has extensive preliminary data for every single specific aim, and some cynics might say that they almost want the project completed before they'll give you funding. We do not do that. So the preliminary data we ask for is really to more supporting feasibility, and we're really looking for more innovative sorts of things. Of course, the closer you are to the clinic, perhaps the less innovative it might be perceived, but it would be innovative in a clinical way, not in a discovery way. Corinne, I hope that is helpful. So it's quite different, and the big difference is that the SCN is not a mini CIHR at all. We really have a mandate to move regenerative medicine approaches into the clinic, and so we're in that gap that exists between basic research and at the other side, commercialization or clinical delivery.
I'm going to skip just a question here because there's one related to the impact grants as well. Are industry partners acceptable for impact grants?
Yes.
Well? They're acceptable everywhere.
Everywhere, anywhere, everywhere, yes.
Are funds transferable to another eligible institution? That really depends upon, are you transferring them to another individual who is not named on the application? Because if that's the case, then no. I think funds will only go to individuals who are listed as an investigator or a co-investigator.
Yeah, and it should be fully described in the budget, of course.
Yes.
The use of those funds and the use of the partner funds also.
Indeed. Is gene therapy for hereditary diseases acceptable?
If it is regenerative, it certainly can be. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for this information webinar. You mentioned earlier cancer-related treatments. Do they have to be regenerative in nature, or is understanding the role and function of how cancer stem cells affect tumor growth and invasion enough for an impact grant?
If it's not regenerative, it's not eligible.
Okay.
So simply killing off the tumor is not a regenerative medicine grant. And the reason why we've taken a harder line on that is that there are plenty of other places to go to for cancer funding. There are health charities, there are cancer agencies, and there's at least 2 cancer panels at CIHR.
I'm wondering if a proposal involving technology to generate stem cell-like cells from mature T cells for cellular therapies would be competitive for an impact grant.
So if these are being generated from, let's say, induced pluripotent stem cells or human embryonic stem cells, for example, that would be something that we would entertain.
Yeah, I don't know if we can talk about competitive, but it would be eligible. So are there any other ECR-centric grants coming soon through SCN? So maybe I can refer to that. Stem Cell Network is currently writing our application for our next period of activity, which we hope will fund us through 25 through to 29. Until we secure that funding, we can't run further programs. We are hoping that we'll be able to continue the ECR-related awards in that actual funding period. So there's not going to be anything until our next cycle.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that we've been in the last several years been given limited tranches of funding. We had 1-year funding, we had 2 years of funding, we now have 3 years of funding. And as well as you can well imagine, it's very difficult to mount a program that's reiterative with these short-term tranches. And in our next application for funding, it'll be for 5 years, but it would be really nice to have something more solid to stand on than these short-term amounts of funding, so that we could actually have annual competitions and roll this out on a regular basis. However, given these short-term arrangements, and even 5 years I view as a short-term commitment, this is essentially impossible to deliver in this manner. So get out there and write letters to the Prime Minister, Minister of Health, Minister of Industry, and lobby if you think this is what we're doing is useful and a good thing. So why not? Go for it.
There's a question here. Is gene therapy for, well, I think is Duchenne's muscular dystrophy considered as regenerative, Michael?
I think in the past we've reviewed those. What do you think, John? I think so. But expressing dystrophin muscle fibers, is that enhancing regeneration? Possibly not, given what we now know about Duchenne's being a satellite cellopathy, to use Peter Zammit's term. So possibly. I'm sorry I don't have a definitive answer.
The next one, is iPSC-based disease modeling eligible?
Yes. We funded those in the past.
Would therapies that are regenerative, cell-based, but not stem cell-based be eligible?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bioengineering approaches don't necessarily involve
we've got another question. Essentially duplicates the second from last one. Is disease modeling using embryonic stem cells or iPSCs considered regenerative enough?
Well, it depends. Let me qualify that. So we have funded those sorts of grants before, but usually they've been using that as a platform to evaluate regenerative strategies. That would be a more competitive grant. Simply modeling as an end of itself, you need to provide a translational direction, how this would be used at a minimum.
And I would say that the onus actually falls on the applicant in the LOI to describe the regenerative nature of their project, and there is space there to do that, and give us all of the context you can to be able to make that decision. It's important that you do that in that section. Any more questions? I'm actually going to bring up Tillamook meetings. We've got a record number of registrants for this so far, and it's going to be a big meeting this year. We've got, so it's on October 3rd to 5th. I'm sorry, it's automatically moving forward there for some reason. And it's also an opportunity for community members to get together, formulate teams, because it's in that time frame before the submission of the application. So it's an opportunity to actually make those connections and develop those teams, develop those collaborative ideas, etc. It's a really good opportunity to connect with the network in general and all of your colleagues as well.
Yeah, and if I can expand on that, the Stem Cell Network is a very different type of organization in that we are a community. It's very different than the funding councils you've historically have interacted with. It is owned in a sense by its members, and anyone can be a member. It's an open club, and Tillamook really is a wonderful meeting. It's now really a meeting with an international stature. As once you receive funding, our expectation is that you will and your trainees will attend the meeting and to begin to understand how the culture and collaborative nature of the network is. And what we found is that fostering East-West interactions really accelerates the research in quite a dramatic way, and making new colleagues and friends in a national context really powers the research. And accelerates it in quite a profound way. So you'll be joining a community of researchers rather than being a passive recipient who only sees the granting council, at application time. I should also say that we really are involved with the research through your reporting and dialogue. We'll be giving you advice over the course of your project how to identify opportunities and augment and accelerate what you're doing. So in a sense, we'll be helping you manage the research rather than funding and forgetting. And again, it's a community. It's not a standard typical funder that you perhaps have more experience with.
And I think those are really important points, Michael. And just to add to that, you don't have to be a funded stem cell network investigator or part of a funded stem cell network funded award to actually take advantage of many of the training and knowledge mobilization activities that we actually run as well. That's open to anybody who's in regenerative medicine across the country. We've got one final question that's come in. Would establishing a stem cell-based biomanufacturing platform for therapeutic models be within scope?
I think, sorry, this is manufacturing?
Stem cell-based biomanufacturing platform for therapeutic molecules.
Yeah, so I think the program, what is it called? The accelerating
clinical translation.
Clinical translation absolutely includes manufacturing challenges and so on.
Okay. Any more questions? With that then, we will say thank you very much to everybody who has attended. We look forward to seeing your applications and hopefully look forward to seeing you in person at TMM as well.